Good morning, and welcome to day 217 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. Today we look at 2 Corinthians 11 through 13 as we complete Paul's second letter to the Corinthian church and really come full circle to where we started last week in chapter 1. By way of reminder, in chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, Paul sets forth what I think are pretty thematic verses for this letter when he says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort. He comforts us in all our affliction so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as the sufferings of Christ overflow to us, so also through Christ our comfort overflows." And notice what he shows. He shows that God is not entering into neutral circumstances. God is entering into empty circumstances where something's been hurt, where something's been injured, where something feels less than full. And when God enters into those things, he not only fills it up, so to speak, he does so to the point where it overflows. And all of this should help us, because this is an image, this should help all of us understand what Paul does in 2 Corinthians, because this is an image he comes back to multiple times, the idea of something empty that is filled by something from God, a clay vessel, as we saw, a tent, a temple itself. Because for Paul, this is the logic of the gospel. When Paul was among the Corinthian Christians, he had refused to take payment from them. This was a particularly difficult church. But for Paul, that meant that whatever fruit they bore by the power of the Spirit would be all the harder to refute or contest. It would verify and validate his gospel and mission to these Gentiles apart from their observance from the law. Which is why Paul was so troubled, hurt, and potentially emptied while these people came in and said, well, if Paul's a real apostle, he'd be worthy of paying. You know, he's not better of speech. He's not impressive to look at. And so Paul somewhat engages, as a rhetorical maneuver, in chapter 11, that way of thinking. And when you get down to the latter part of the chapter, he says, But in whatever anyone dares to boast, I'm speaking foolishly or nonsensibly." In other words, adopting the mindset of his opponents. He says, "I also dare." He says, "Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I'm talking like a madman. I'm a better one. With far more labors, many more imprisonments, far worse beatings, and many times near death. 5 times I received the 40 lashes minus 1 from the Jews. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I received a stoning. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I have spent a night and a day in the open sea. On frequent journeys I faced dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers among false brothers, toil and hardship, many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold and without clothing, not to mention other things. There is the daily pressure on me, my concern for all the churches. Who is weak, and I am not weak? Who is made to stumble, and I do not burn with indignation? But if boasting is necessary, listen to what he says, I will boast in my weaknesses. Why? Because when we are weak, God can be our strength. When we are empty, God can fill us to the point of overflowing. In fact, he returns to this in chapter 12, 6 following. He says, "For if I want to boast, I wouldn't be a fool, because I would be telling the truth. But I will spare you so that no one can credit me with something beyond what he sees in me or hears from me, especially because of extraordinary revelations. Therefore, so that I would not exalt myself, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to torment me." And people have, speculated over what that is. I tend to lean towards some opponent to his ministry. Some messenger of Satan to torment me so that I would not exalt myself. Concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it would leave me. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness." Therefore, Paul says, I will gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. The Corinthians, for a time, had been led to believe that if Paul were really something, God would keep him from difficult circumstances, that he would be elevated, exalted, that his ministry would just materially flourish. But for Paul, it's precisely the opposite. He enters into their type of thinking to show that all the things that he's gone through for the gospel, all the ways he's been emptied out, harmed, allowed God to fill him up, allowed God to heal, allowed God to be powerful in his weakness. This is a passage to which God calls me back many times, because Paul culminates this. It says, with all these things that I've went through, what's even beyond them is my daily concern for the churches. We are tempted to want a life where we rely on God less. But it's precisely when we are weak that we're able to see God be strong. It's precisely when we are hurting when we're best able to see God's power for healing. It's precisely when we're empty that we have that space where God can fill us to the point of overflowing, not just to meet our needs, but to overflow into the needs of others. So you see this beautifully in the life and ministry of Paul, and I pray that that would be a challenge and a comfort for wherever we are in life today. Keep reading, reflecting, and responding, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.